Come on, let's record a podcast.
Hey, okay.
Actually, it's a little bit kind of Inception-y, isn't it, this one?
How?
We'll get onto that. We'll maybe start and then...
Oh, yeah, I guess. Don't just fuck off.
Feels like it's been ages. Let's start.
Hello, Internet. I'm Firebolt.
And I'm the Orbiter.
You're always managed to... I'm doing that intro again because I hate you.
Yeah, but you know it's going to go in.
Yeah, but the proper intro...
I'll cut it out.
Oh, fuck it. Fine, we'll just get on with it then.
Okay.
Right. News to... welcome all to episode... I've forgotten how to do a podcast.
It does seem like it's been a while. I don't know why.
It hasn't, though.
No.
I mean, it's been less time than it was the last time.
What episode number is it?
It's episode 41.
Is it? Is it really, though?
Don't know.
Oh, you're not going to look it up,
I don't
surely.
actually know.
It's something of the... It's Anyway, we are recording this on the Sunday the 25th of January, 2000...
January.
Fucking hell. What the fuck?
You're just fucking broken today.
Sunday the 25th of... yeah, do you know why it feels like it's
For
been
reference,
fucking ages?
if you're not watching this in...
widescreen, high definition...
near the time, it is
stereo
August.
surround... August, yeah, 25th of August.
Just so that they know that you thinking it's January is batshit crazy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously for various sensible reasons, I'm not going to go into any detail, but it perhaps seems like it's been such a long time because our family's pretty much blown up since the last episode, but
yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
Well,
it's been referenced on my Better Call Paul, but...
There may be some coded reference to it.
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't actually say the episode number. Oh, I don't give a shit.
And no, we haven't been breeding jihadis.
What? I don't get it.
I said the family had pretty much blown up.
Oh. Ha 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 ha. Anyway, news.
It's hot again.
Trump tried to buy Greenland.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Which
that's
is just fucking normal now.
But that's is that not slightly related to the possibility that obviously his ideas about global warming and stuff and climate change are kind of... I saw something about the Arctic opening up as a shipping route once the ice caps melted.
That's a good thing. Fucking hell.
But if you think about it, Greenland would be in an extremely advantageous strategic position at that point.
On that subject, exciting news. David Koch has died.
Who's he?
He's... he funds a lot of right-wing activists and owns a lot of coal companies and oil, that sort of thing. Basically...
Was that his real name, or did he...
Koch.
Yeah.
Well, it's C-O-C-H... K-O-C-H, sorry.
Oh, right, okay. Cock.
Yeah, but it's pronounced Koch, apparently.
Apparently.
They're brothers, so the other one's probably going to continue it, but it means that there's just a slight chance that we're not going to all die.
Yeah.
A slightly higher chance.
Boris has
Slightly.
gone from no deal being 1,000,000 to 1 chance to it'll be touch and go.
It's just sort of at this point, like they are just wanting a no deal at this. It's not really even disguised anymore, is it? Like they used to pretend, oh no, that's only what we do in the worst case scenario, and now they're just like, yes, let's go for the worst case scenario.
And Trump says we're getting rid of the anchor around our ankles.
It's just sort of... I think I saw on Twitter earlier asking 5 questions to a Brexiteer. And this isn't related to the whole, oh, we actually voted for it thing, because regardless if we voted for it, is it actually a fucking good idea? I would say no, because does it actually improve any part of your life? Does it get rid of any problems? Are there any actual EU laws that have been forced on the UK, not that the UK actually fucking voted for, well, the MEPs voted for, that you hate? And then I forgot the other 2, but whatever. Basically, oh yeah, one of them was, what trade deals are the EU actually stopping the UK from doing? Because if it's just dodgy food standards that then they kind of need to be transparent with that, but they won't be.
Speaking of which, I've pretty much gone vegan in personal home news. I say pretty much, but kind of just...
The planet is better off for it.
Yeah, I'm not being strict with myself, but I haven't eaten any meat and I've had practically no dairy this week, just because I didn't want it.
I'm kind of still sort of a bit ashamed of myself for not going vegan. It's just sort of a difficult thing. But since you are going vegan, and Mum's already practically vegan.
That's the point, though. I'm not really. I'm not... See, for me, it's a conglomeration of reasons, none of which on their own really...
Yeah.
The one that I suppose stands out to me the most is the environmental impact. But again, there's pros and cons. There's arguments for and against, but it's just... there's no argument against it from an environmental standpoint.
No, in the end, from doing biology and getting an A, just gonna slip that in there. It's just it's more efficient as well.
Which marketing do you believe, basically?
Yeah, but it's sort of like,
and then some of it's science based as
they'll
well.
say, "Oh, you've been brainwashed by people just caring about the planet," and it's just sort of...
Well, in response to that, I would say welcome to the world, because we've all been brainwashed since birth. It was funny that we've been watching a bit of Berlin Philharmonic's digital concert hall, haven't we? And you mentioned about you think it's funny how the German word for advertising is propaganda.
I just noticed it in the subtitles. I just heard propaganda and advertisement came up at the bottom. I was just like, fuck, that's weird.
Pretty much is. I mean,
never knew that.
In a capitalist society,
I swear there's
whoever
another word
you
for
are,
advertisement.
if you believe that you're not swayed by advertising, then
no, because I swear when I was doing my German, like at some point you have to write a letter, which is a job application.
Just stopping to smile at my daughter there.
Okay.
Oh, she waved too. She's getting brave on podcast. Now she's staring at us in a creepy way. Which reminds me, we went to see Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark the other day, and it's fucking horrifying.
Yeah,
it's creepy as fuck.
I saw a bit of how they do that. Well,
I really enjoyed it, but it is disturbing.
One of the actual actors for one of the monsters is just a weird sort of jangly guy. I don't know how else. That
would probably be Mitai Doty Walker. That's the character's name.
He was also in Game of Thrones, I think, one of the White Walkers.
Yeah,
in that bit in... Sorry, spoiler alert.
If you haven't seen it yet, it's
the bit in the library with Aya sort of bends down, and that guy actually bends like that. It's not CGI.
Yeah. No, disturbing film. Go see it if you're sick and twisted like me.
I mean, I'm sick and twisted, but I don't want to see it.
Yeah, anything else happening in the news, really? Oh, England apparently have rekindled the Ashes tournament by winning something.
No, no one cares about cricket. No one...
Cricket?
Whatever, shut
cricket.
up.
No, I
cricket.
don't do sport, really.
No.
So.
Well, it's not just not caring about sport, it's just cricket is the most fucking boring of the sports. I just find it so... just... bleh.
It's great for sitting under trees. See, if you're at a private school and you have to play cricket, it's great when you're in bat because you basically sit under a tree all afternoon listening to the radio. If you're shit, you get onto the pitch like once and then you're out straight away.
Fair enough. But why not just play rounders? It's a lot more exciting.
Yeah, I do enjoy that more, I suppose. Anyway, have we done enough news?
Well, on the subject of ecological stuff, the rainforest is on fire.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, isn't Mr. Brazil guy kind of pissed off with everybody saying, "Here, hang on a minute, this is not good."
Yeah, well,
because is he not trying to clear it for mining and farming?
Well, that's been a long-standing issue in Brazil with the Amazon.
The planet doesn't need lungs, does it? I mean,
no, whatever. And I'm just so fucked off with all of it.
You'd never know. The planet may survive long enough to last your lifetime. You never know. It could happen.
Optimism.
Yeah. That's pretty much where we're at, isn't it?
It's not. I mean, humanity will probably survive the climate crisis. It's just
In what form?
all the situations that are bad right now, like refugee crises.
Humanity might survive it, but
Much of our economic and cultural centres will be underwater. Loads of people will die. There'll be loads of natural disasters.
and lots of people going, "I told you so." Nah, 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 nah. And the rich people going, "We don't care because we've got the money, and you guys can fuck off." Because that's what rich capitalists do.
But it's sort of their holdings will be affected by it. I mean, especially with
They'll find a way to manipulate the power structure.
especially with the
to their
Netherlands,
advantage.
given how much they. I'm trying to remember what it was. I think they're the second biggest exporter in the world, which is surprising for their size.
Of what? Anything, everything.
I think everything.
So that's tied to GDP, isn't it? Kind of.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised about that. I'll have to look this up because I might be spreading lies. We wouldn't want that now, would we?
No, I mean, after all, we are a respected news source.
Okay, they ranked second in something that was surprising.
Netherlands.
Yeah.
Shiniest heads.
Countries by exports.
Shiniest heads with of people named Pate.
Well, I'd hope so because it's quite a Dutch name. I'll just check this. It's not actually, but it is seventh, which is still surprising.
Seventh of what? Oh, exports.
Yeah.
Millions of though. I mean, that's percentage of. What about percentage of GDP? That's the thing. 82.4. Fucking hell! Look at Hong Kong.
Oh yeah. Well, Hong Kong makes all the shit that. Well, I'm guessing they just sort of. They're very small and they make a lot of shit, basically. Anyway, that sort of thing, because if you didn't know, most of the Netherlands is below sea level.
Yeah.
And whilst they do have loads of dams to try and prevent this from being a problem, it's sort of getting to a point where just at some point it will get too much and then the Netherlands are completely underwater.
What are they going to do? Because, I mean, obviously, in my lifetime, we've started to see, and it's not just about the sea level rising, but this is also sinking as well as Venice is a lot more flooded than it used to be when I was younger.
So
regularly now.
Something I did notice, and this is through a search engine that I'm using called Ecosia. It'd be a good idea to download it yourself. Apparently, I think it's every 45 searches, roughly, it plants a tree.
All right, okay.
In somewhere that needs new
the
trees.
search engine plants a tree?
Yeah, through various projects that they're doing. So
so the people who run the search engine plant the tree, not the search engine itself.
No, but it's sort of
that would be good.
Roughly given how much your search gives them money.
Good idea.
Why not download
Ecosia?
Yes.
Cool.
I think it's like a Chrome add-on.
Oh right, okay.
Well, we use Chrome. It's probably on Firefox and other stuff as well.
Yeah.
But that was talking about the desertification in places like Madagascar and Namibia.
Do you know, as soon as you said that, I just thought, I like to move it.
Of course you did.
Move it. Right. What's that song? The zebra sings with the rainbow Afro Circus. That's it. Can't remember the tune, but Afro Circus.
It's the circus theme tune.
Afro Circus.
Stop.
Afro Circus.
Just let's just stop this. Oh, just fun fact: European Union is the biggest exporter in the world overall as well. It's just not a country, but just in case you were wondering, whether Brexit's still a good idea.
By a considerable amount.
Yes,
like
by about twice the amount of
more
China.
Than double its. Well, in fact, they haven't even included it in the ranking. Because I suppose it's not a country, is it? So
yeah, well, they do that with GDP as well, and Hong Kong's also not included in the ranking, but it ranks above the UK.
Yeah,
in terms of exports.
Yeah. So, I mean, UK is not that low down the European Union.
Yeah, but keep in mind, we also export a lot of our stuff to the EU as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
which is always
It'd
fun.
be interesting to see how those stats will be affected, because obviously, yeah, I mean, European Union exporting, that won't include exports within the European Union, will it? But
I don't know, actually.
I wouldn't have thought so,
No,
because
you
it's not
wouldn't
a
think
European
so,
Union
but it's sort
export,
of,
is
it's
it?
still technically exports.
Yeah, but
It's just
that's what I
all
mean.
the-
A lot of the figures of like Germany and France and Netherlands and Italy could go down. Well, will go down considerably when the UK leaves, because they export here quite a lot.
Yeah, but they also export more to the rest of the EU, probably.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I don't know the specific figures, but it's just...
In fact, within the EU, we're
probabilistic, huh?
probably the most expensive country to export to, aren't we? Probably.
Yeah, I mean,
Or, well,
given the ferry
logistically.
cost as well,
Yeah.
because it's a lot less expensive just to get a truck to do things, but
Indeed.
also given that I'm not entirely sure how that works, because there are sort of custom checks, but no, it's not that. I can't remember.
I do remember.
Oh wait, no, it's you don't have to. I'm trying to remember just from going over on the ferry to Calais. But I don't remember them doing passport checks. I think they did check the actual coach, but I don't remember them doing passport checks on the way to France. But on the way back, they did.
I know when I was a teenager, the youth orchestra used to go to France, or used to cross the channel on pretty much every show they did. And one of them, they got delayed by about 2 hours on the way back because they had all the instruments off the coach, and they basically took the skins off all the drums and stuff to check inside.
That would just piss me off to fuck. Because I'm not exactly sure how that necessarily even works, because I've never seen a drum without the skins on.
It's got to be done properly, otherwise you can.
Yeah, but I don't
ruin the
imagine
skin.
customs officials do it. Properly.
No, I mean you can get to the situation where technically they can insist on looking inside things like cellos and what have you. It's like, well, you actually going to trash the instrument doing that? So
yeah, but you'd have to replace the strings, wouldn't you?
Well, even strings have got to be taken off carefully. I remember once thinking we were playing a practical joke on a violinist friend of mine at school who was actually in the National Youth Orchestra. He was a really good player, but he left his violin in a practice room over the break at school, and we, for a joke, went and detuned it by a semitone, like detuned every string by a semitone, and he went ballistic. Because he was like, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't do it properly, the sound posts can fall out from under the bridge if the tension's not right and all this stuff. I think he maybe overreacted a little bit,
maybe.
But at the same time,
I thought you were going to say like he didn't retune it afterwards and then played it off tuning something, but it's sort of, I thought, well, wouldn't you just tune it up actually? And
although that does remind me of a rather funny rehearsal that I did once. There's a piece. I'm trying to remember what the name of the piece is, but it starts with a solo trumpet fanfare, which goes dun 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 dun, and you do this for ages, and then the next thing that happens is the whole string section comes in. Only it was written for trumpet in A, and I forgot to transpose it, so I was playing it on a trumpet in B flat. Which was fine when I first started playing, because nobody could tell. But then the whole string section came in a completely different key. It was like all of them were playing it wrong. It's not me, it's them. Anyway, should we get on with the podcast?
Perhaps. I did try and sort of allude to the subject of the podcast.
I did hear you mention the word. Different cultures.
Yeah, well, it's just culture.
I looked it up because you know how I like semantics. So I
don't
found
like people
three
that like
definitions.
Okay, go on.
Well, one is pertaining to the collection of art and stuff that makes up a particular thing. I'm gonna have to look it up now. Oh, look! You made me minimise the window.
You did that.
Okay, so there's three.
You dildo.
The arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively, such as 20th century popular culture, or the ideas, customs, and social behaviour of a particular people or society, which I think is actually quite closely linked, because the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement really constitute to a large extent the ideas, customs, and social behaviour of a particular people or society, don't they? I think we can disregard the third one, the biological, unless you particularly want to talk about biological
Not
cultures and
particularly.
yogurt and stuff like that.
No.
Let's stick with societal culture then.
Yes. Well, that was the intention.
How the fuck do we talk about culture?
I might
Are
be.
we cultured?
That's a good place to start. How do we decide whether people are cultured or not?
Well, I think that's a matter of perspective and definition, isn't it? Because what's culture to one person isn't to another. But I think you have to accept that everything about a group, a society, if you like, is culture of different kinds. I mean, you've got pop culture. We've got some people would regard high art as cultured, wouldn't they? Like classical music and,
sort of,
and art galleries and
prestigious
classics.
Prestigious mediums,
Yeah,
I guess, like paintings as well.
But then you can't then to me, I don't think you can justifiably say that such things as urban industrial art, such as graffiti, murals and stuff like that. I don't think you could say that they're not culture.
Yeah, well,
justifiably.
You get into that discussion as well, sort of, and we discussed it at length in. Was it last episode that was our... No, this is actually episode 42.
Is it, though?
I don't know. No, I swear it might... Oh, I don't know.
I swear.
We'll have to search up on the actual YouTube channel, won't we? Or the site. Just type the fucking thing.
No. Oh, look, we're on Apple Podcasts.
Oh, I know. It
labels
labels
42.
us as society and culture. This is episode 42, which...
What? Hang on.
What?
This? I'm just... Well, I don't know if there's any kind of... Apple Podcasts have a preview page for our podcast.
Right.
And looking further down, it then has a list of top podcasts in society and culture underneath us. Are we in society and culture?
Well, yes, it says there.
Oh, we are in society and culture.
You obviously, when you applied to put it on Apple Podcasts...
Oh, they haven't just decided that then?
Decided to put it in society. It was probably just the most applicable thing.
According to this, it says we've got 43 episodes, but that's it.
Which, particularly in this episode, is exactly accurate because we are literally talking about specifically culture.
Specifically culture.
But we usually do talk about society and culture.
I've never actually looked to see whether or not we've got any reviews. And while we're talking about that, if you're on iTunes, give us a review. If you're on any podcast thing, give us some feedback of some description so that we can spread our message to the world.
Unlike most things where it's sorted by views or listens, I think on Apple Podcasts it is sorted by reviews.
Yeah.
So make sure it's a 5-star fucking review.
I don't think threatening the audience is a good way to...
I didn't threaten them.
Well, you swore at them, you effed at them. Is that
all the
cultured?
time.
You're swearing at your audience. We could be like...
Whatever.
I'm going to show my age now. I was going to say we could be like that guy that used to be edgy, but I've forgotten his name now. He's not edgy anymore. You probably haven't even heard of him because it was a long time ago. And
well, if you could actually tell me his fucking name.
I just told you I can't remember it.
But yeah.
He was the guy that helped write We Will Rock You with the musical. Ben Elton. That's it.
I've heard the name, but...
He used to be quite big in the comedy world because he was kind of edgy and political, but that was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Edgy nowadays just tends to mean racist, which is sad, but that's a part of our culture now. Fucking internet culture is weird.
Being racist is edging.
It's sort of... It makes people feel uncomfortable, so you're being controversial, but in reality you're just an asshole.
I'll let that one slip by.
What?
You don't know what edging is, do you?
It's probably something sexual now that I think about it.
So, yeah. So so what are we going to talk about for another hour?
I've got loads to talk about.
Okay,
right.
Go on then.
Have you heard, or just to start us off lightly, have you heard of Jordan Peterson?
No.
Right. He's a professor. I think he was a professor of... I think he did actually get fired at some point for being kind of an asshole of psychology.
Okay.
and he's written a bunch of books on.
A bunch of books. Is that the plural term for books?
I don't know.
Here, have a bunch of books, darling.
It's just one of the names for a group of things. Okay.
Okay.
Right. He's written a bunch of books on society, on culture, but also just sort of, I don't know. He's just gone on this thing about people being weak by showing certain. It's an asshole, basically. But very transphobic as well.
Why do you bring his name up?
Well, because he mentions a lot in his books, from what I've seen, about he is Canadian, but he seems to sort of more reference sort of Western culture, but pertaining sort of more to America, as you'd think of it probably. But when you talk about Western culture, sometimes that doesn't really translate to the rest of so-called Western culture, because Western culture is a bit vague and not really applicable to actual culture.
Yeah.
Well, it's more sort of Western civilization he talks about.
It's a weird one, that, isn't it? Because civilization, certainly over the last couple of centuries, has moved, or the Western civilization has moved a lot further west. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, when you look back historically, Western civilization in the sort of classical music era and before would have meant kind of Europe, really.
Yeah.
Primarily.
But it's sort of, even now, Korea and Japan are, maybe less so Korea, but definitely Japan are a large part of Western culture, especially Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because, I mean, geographically, Australia's not Western at all, is it, compared to...
In reality, it just means those who don't hate the colonial oppressors.
Okay.
No comment on that, right?
Who are the colonial oppressors?
Us.
Not anymore.
Well, no,
are we?
Less so now.
Please let us know if we are, because I know it's been fading out over the years, but I'd hate to think that we still were.
Well, actually, we still do own quite a lot of islands that were due to colonial oppression. So,
I didn't realise until this whole Brexit shit blew up that Gibraltar wasn't separate from Spain. I thought it was an island.
No,
until
it's right fucking next door.
Yeah, that's weird, isn't it?
It's just this little bit.
Yeah.
Although
a peninsula.
I think the only exclaves in the world. Because do you know what an enclave is?
Oh, why do you have to show me up in front of the whole world?
I'm not.
You're just asking me.
Yeah.
The limits.
Well, I'm just asking.
I've heard the word, but I don't know exactly.
It means a bit of country that's entirely surrounded by another country.
Right. Okay. So what's an exclave then?
An exclave is
one that surrounds a country.
A bit of country that's surrounded by a country and the sea. So the only exclaves, I think, in the world are owned by Spain, which are actually two cities in North Africa,
right?
In Morocco. So they have a little bit of the coast in Morocco.
Well, could you not say that Portugal was an exclave then, technically?
No, well, it's sort of a bit of country that isn't attached to the rest of the country.
Oh, I see.
And although the UK does have like overseas territories,
like Alaska,
I guess kind of.
Is any of Alaska south of Canada, or is it all up north end?
There's a little bit that goes down the side of Canada, so it sort of...
It doesn't join on to the rest of the US, though, does it?
There's nothing south of its southern border.
Right.
Which is weirdly very straight for historical reasons.
Straight?
Yeah,
I thought you meant, like, heterosexual.
No, the border between the US
I've noticed that
and Canada is
some of the maps.
Really straight. Yeah. And you can actually see it physically where they've cut trees down where it is.
Why would you do that?
To show the border.
Who to? The trees don't care.
Each other. I mean, Canada doesn't really have a particularly stringent stance on borders because it's actually gotten to a point where people, refugees passing through the US to avoid customs in the US catching up to them, end up traveling to Canada, illegally crossing, where they know that they will actually get fucking asylum, because
Yeah.
Canada, unlike the US, actually gives a shit about human rights, but whatever. But anyway, the point that I was going to get onto is...
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, well, a lot of what he mentioned is around these Judeo-Christian values that apparently govern
Oh my god.
civilized society.
Do they, though?
No, because if you actually read the fucking Bible or the Torah, you would see that it's full of...
Are they not the ones that had people crucified, you know?
Well, that was the Romans.
No, it was... Well, they were the ones that enacted it, but it was under pressure from the Jews. Because do you not know that it was blasphemy that he was crucified for? He called himself the Son of God, and the Jews didn't like it, so they put pressure on the Romans to have him put to death.
I thought it was just that they saw him,
which is why that's why in the at the top of the cross there was the letters INRI, because in Latin that meant in nomine Rex Judeorum, which means in name King of the Jews.
Are you sure that this wasn't just that post this happening, Christians put blame on Jewish people?
Oh, it's quite possible. No, I mean, but at that time there was no Christian church. I know it was the church that it was the higher up members of the church that had him, that basically insisted that he was crucified for claiming to be the Son of God and therefore King of the Jews.
Well,
he was Jewish.
People that I think ended up claiming to be the Son of God around that area.
Yeah, he was Jewish, and they didn't like it. I'm not saying anything against the Jews. This I'm talking about what the story. I mean, this is why Jews don't accept the New Testament. They have the Old Testament. Christians have both, because they think of Jesus as being the next kind of big thing.
This is, I think, would it be
Is
fair
religion part of culture?
Yes, but would it be fair to say, and this is going to get onto this because quite often people justify criticism of Middle Eastern cultures as pointing to ideas in the Quran, part of Islam.
Mm.
Are certain ideas inherent to cultures?
Well, I don't know. It's a difficult one nowadays because cultures are so mixed. And I think that's one of the reasons why particularly Jerusalem is such a conflicted area, because there are different cultures all in one place. Now,
a long complicated history around that area.
But I mean, we would say that in this country, that those areas where there's cosmopolitan mixing of different cultures are the ones where a kind of a resulting more diverse and interesting culture emerges.
Yeah. I think it would be worth mentioning, just for people that aren't aware, because a lot of people seem to take this view as Middle Eastern countries and those around that area as being backward or in the past and stuck in traditions, that sort of thing. But it's probably worth mentioning that they were doing astronomy whilst we were in the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
And if it weren't for India, we wouldn't have the number 0.
In some ways, that does worry me, because I'm a little bit worried about the warning signs of, if they were that advanced in a scientific and exploratory kind of way and into finding out about the universe and stuff, what happened?
I think there was some sort of reformation within Islam.
And if that can happen in somewhere like that, then surely the same thing can happen.
Because there's very
elsewhere.
little awareness of the politics between different sects of Islam, and I don't really know much other than the names of a few of them myself, where you've got Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims that very much disagree on some pretty small details, quite similarly to Catholicism and Protestantism.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as soon as you said that, yeah.
But it sort of gets to the point where the sorts of people giving certain types of criticism to those cultures are very happy to see similar ideas within their own culture, so long as it supports their side.
I just don't understand.
Understand
They're
what?
basically talking about the same thing, just using different ideas and metaphors.
Yeah, I mean, you always get this on. I think somebody had posted a picture of them holding a gun and a Bible in front of the American flag.
Mm.
And similarly, there was a picture of someone holding the Quran and the gun in front of the Saudi Arabian flag, and somebody just comparing those two, which are almost identical except for the fact that they happen in different cultures.
I just wish. Why don't people just grow the fuck up?
Yeah. Well, it's this sort of. You do get it as well with places that are also democracies, which I can sort of get some criticism of these places from a cultural standpoint of their governments are oppressive. But then it does just become racism when you take that against an entire people.
Do you know something that not worries me, but something that I often wonder about is if there wasn't so much conflict and suffering between different cultures and such seismic shifts within cultures during our kind of human history, do you think what we refer to as culture in terms of the arts would be anything like as rich? Because the reason I say that is because a lot of the music and, well, all forms of art, but obviously I relate more to music, is specifically derived from struggle and pain and political upheaval and suffering, and it has so much emotion in it that's born of that, and anger and frustration, and you think, and I sometimes wonder whether what our art world would look like if we lived in a utopian society.
You can still have when we say utopian society, you do still mean, for the most part, people would still disagree.
Yeah.
It wouldn't just be everyone walking around smiling at each other. There would still be an exchange of ideas going on, ideally.
As soon as you say that, I think ancient Greece.
Well, well, I can get onto that because there's some shady stuff going on there. Well, ancient Greece, so it's sort of like there was some shady stuff going on there thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
Although there probably still is, to be honest, with the way Greece's economy is. Anyway,
I'm gonna suggest that we take a small pause to refill my beer shortly.
I want to say something profound.
Stop headbutting.
I want to say something profound.
Yeah.
There can still be diversity without conflict. And I think that's something. Diversity is the thing that births the richness in our culture.
Yeah, I suppose I do agree to a certain extent that
because you find
there's no doubt that our art would be very different.
Yeah,
but that's not to say that it wouldn't be at least equally as good.
The most culturally diverse places in the world tend to be the most culturally rich. This is why cities, and it's not just because they have a big population, end up attracting the most artists, because it's loads of different experiences to be found in the same place. The sort of place where you can turn into one neighbourhood.
Well, to take a simple example,
get a completely different idea of the place to another neighbourhood.
To take a simple example of something as like a smaller unit of musicians as, say, a 4 or 5 piece band,
right?
You bring 5 people together who are going to have differences in the way that they have experienced music, been trained or not. Their particular everything is going to be slightly different, and it's that mixture, it's that recipe.
Experience the world as well.
Yeah,
because I know you have told me before about various, particular political differences with especially one band member. But
anyway, it just occurred to me, we are a part of the global culture, which is now, I mean, culture itself has changed drastically since the World Wide Web came about, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It has become a global cultural mix.
Yeah, I mean, it's been bad in a lot of ways, but it's also been good, I would say, because before the internet, it'd be quite, unless you actually went to a place, be a lot harder to find out about another place.
Well, this is
Because when you read books and stuff like that, it's not usually,
because I remember at the age
there's
of
always a little bit of bias there.
I remember
But
at
if
the
you hear
age
from
of
someone that's
about
actually from there.
I think it was about 13, going on a music cruise and visiting Greece, Crete, Israel, and Italy, and it was the first time. I mean, I think I'd been to Jersey, to the Channel Islands when I was much younger, but it was really the first time I went abroad. And at that point, this was 1985. It was my first experience of non-British culture, and it was quite shock, I suppose.
Mm.
Not in a bad way, but it was very different. It felt foreign,
Yeah.
exotic.
The idea is not to be afraid of that just because you don't know much about it.
Yeah, no, I loved it.
Yeah. That's the sort of... And it tends to be the people that haven't actually experienced much, the sort of people that don't leave their little...
But even to the point, I'm going to say I loved it, but
bubble.
even to the point where when we were approaching Haifa, which was the port for coming into Tel Aviv, we had a serious talk from the ship captain about what was going to be happening when we approached, and they sent a pilot boat out from the port, and this was standard routine at the time, sent a pilot boat out from the port with divers on board, and they had to basically check all around underneath the ship to make sure there were no bombs attached.
Was that because of the situation with Cyprus?
I don't know what was. It quite possibly could have been. I mean, the boat itself was. It had Limassol written on the side of it because that's the shipyard that it was built in, which was in Cyprus, I believe.
Right. Because I know there are some really, even nowadays. Because when we were in Turkey, we went on a day trip to Rhodes.
Yeah.
Going back, we were waiting in border security for hours on end.
Yeah, that was ridiculous, wasn't it?
I'm not entirely sure why, even now.
No, it just looked like they couldn't be asked to. I don't know. It was just like, I don't know. But I think that was pretty standard for ships coming in to Israel at the time, because this was all I really know.
Israel as well. Yeah.
Obviously, Israel has its ups and downs, but I think this was a particular turbulent time because I do remember around that time the video for Brothers in Arms, Dire Straits, was roughly around that time.
You were a teenager then,
and there were a lot of like roadside bombs and all sorts going on at the time.
What sort of age were you?
I must have been 14. Well, no, I was 13. This was 1985.
Yeah, so this was quite a few years before the Oslo Declaration even. So Palestine wasn't even recognised.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it still isn't really by Israel, but at least it is partly internationally recognised now.
Yeah, there was a lot of shit going on.
Yeah, that would have been around about the time Black September took hostages in that Ugandan airport, I think.
Oh, right, okay. I don't know.
There was a Ugandan airport that I think... There's been a film about it. They took hostages there. Black September were a Palestinian...
In some ways, I would say, remember, I wasn't very politically aware. But then you've got to remember as well that...
Yeah.
At that time, our experience of other cultures was pretty much almost all of it was through the news, and that was limited to basically 6 o'clock and 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
And also just other TV, I guess.
Yeah.
Which would mean that stereotypes would affect you a lot more.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would have also been... I can't remember the sort of timeline of things, but around about... There was...
That was Live Aid, wasn't it, 1985?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe 1984.
No, it was 85 because I know
Okay.
84 was Band-Aid, which was kind of the precursor to that. Do They Know It's
Okay.
Christmas?
So that would have been like the December before.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Which was bizarre, seeing all those artists on stage singing Do They Know It's Christmas in the middle of, I think it was July or something.
Yeah, that's another point. Before the internet, I guess, like, you knew there was
Don't
a
quote me on
crisis
that.
in Africa,
Yeah.
but you didn't really. Whilst you probably did, you get like television ads with charities? Or?
Yeah, we knew it was all going on. It was primarily the news. I mean, I do remember, I don't know if it was the same crisis, but I do remember Ethiopia going through a severe famine around that sort of mid-80s time.
I think there are still problems, but I think that's doing a lot better now because its population's gone up quite a bit. Is I think
Yeah, I still don't. I
fourth or
still, I
fifth
still
most
feel like
populated
there's
in
a
the world.
disconnect between what we see reported on and the statistics that you see. Because I do remember seeing an advert on the cinema screen yesterday, which was talking about millions of children dying every year from starvation. In I don't know if it was in Africa specifically, but
And
you think,
then you
hang on a
sort
minute.
of think, why do we culturally give a shit about something like the
thing
royals?
is, to me, it seems like that was the same statistics that were coming out in the mid-80s that prompted a global movement to try to help. But now it seems to be the accepted norm.
I don't. There would be a factor with that, with the population growth.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's also just sort of, I guess, fatigue from caring so much.
Yeah. Mm. And there's only so much you can do as well. I mean, like, I'm ashamed of the fact that, obviously I'm not well off in terms of the people around me within the society that I'm in. But obviously I'm a lot better off than a lot of people in the world. And going to the cinema and being asked, do you want to donate £1 to children in need whenever you buy something at the counter? And feeling like, the first time I said yes, and then after 2 or 3 times, you're starting to think, well, no, because if I keep donating £1 every time, it's going to cost me a fortune. But it's like, it doesn't. It's just like, essentially, I said to Nienna, I feel like I'm being asked, rather than being asked, do you want to donate £1 to children in need, I'm being asked, do you want to be a mean, heartless bastard? And say no.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, thankfully, there is social pressure around that, but it's sort of, there is sometimes also quite a lot in our culture, a backlash against that, where I guess it's sort of people feeling that they're made to feel guilty. So you get this with the climate crisis, but as well as with veganism.
And there's the thing with homeless people on the streets as well, that there's stories that go around about some of them being professional beggars and earning a lot of money from what they do. And it's like, just like, how can you...
No one would choose to do that. That's a last resort option.
Yeah. Anyway, we're kind of getting off culture, I suppose. I mean, it's all involved in culture. Anything you say about the world is talking about a culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
But
anyway, the point that I was getting to quite a while ago with Jordan Peterson, just to sum up, is sort of, whilst it's problematic still that there's very few democracies in that area, in the Middle East, but also around a lot of Africa, or at least very few good democracies. That being said, the US itself, especially now, is a flawed democracy.
Well, this is what I was going to say. I mean, how do you assess what is a true democracy, and what? Because I mean, there's so many different definitions of democracy as well, aren't there?
Well, if you want to go back to ancient Greece, I'm just going to quickly say my bit about this. The sort of thing about Judean Christian values and all that, saying, oh, Western civilization is crumbling because all these foreign influences are coming in. That's what made America great in the first place, if it ever was great.
Yeah.
It's sort of, don't throw stones from glass houses. Whilst the US is probably on average a better place to live in than much of the rest of the world, there's still loads of problems there. And it's sort of, whilst you can criticize other cultures, be very careful that you don't cross into that line where you're just criticizing the people for something they haven't even necessarily done.
So, I mean, one thing that's kind of emerging from this for me is that going back to the whole sort of what we're talking about when we talk about culture, do you think that these are two different, distinct definitions of culture in terms of some of it is about the art and the collective ideas of a society, and the other definition is the culture, like the indigenous culture of a particular country? Or do you think there is an overlap where we're talking about?
Definitely.
Because in that sense, I would say culture then, it doesn't just include art, it also includes politics.
Because art is essentially meant to spark ideas.
Food.
And whilst values, sort of like principles, but among a larger group of people, are meant to be a lot stronger than just an idea, art still very much influences those.
So, and the other thing I would say is that because the inhabitants of any place are always going to be changing, then culture, you have to accept, has to be changeable, has to change, has to move with the times. So clinging on to a static idea of a culture or a past idea of a culture is not viable.
It is sort of
which I suppose ties into that Judeo-Christian values thing, is that unless something adapts, it will not survive. And that really is the essence of human evolution, isn't it? Adaptation is key.
And I guess I have talked about it before, but you may have forgotten. This updates itself because biological evolution happens at a much slower rate. The more political way to describe it is using something called the Hegelian dialectic.
I remember you saying that. Yeah. I don't remember.
Which is this idea of thesis, the established idea. So, like...
I'm sure I said feces when you mentioned this before.
Probably. That sounds like something you'd say.
Yeah.
The established, fixed sort of tradition, maybe. Then antithesis or antithesis. The new idea. And then synthesis. Ideally, and it doesn't always happen, the best possible combination of these two ideas.
Right.
So where one might go too far and where one might not go far enough, you find some way, maybe not quite in the centre, but maybe sort of just ideally. You see, this the best philosophically.
That immediately makes me call to mind, and even though this might not be a necessarily ideal structure for it to happen within, but to me, it smacks of the dynamic between science and religion, because you've got the pure scientific advancement is unfettered by any moral or ethical values.
I think what you're talking about isn't the difference between science and religion, it's the difference between materialism and spiritualism.
Right.
However, I would argue that you can still have compassion and reason, and this is why I'm a humanist, because whilst there isn't so much spiritualism, there's a sort of belief in humanity and a belief in the importance of what's inside, even though that isn't a soul or any metaphysical idea.
So it's kind of that you can have a keen sense of curiosity about how things work and what's possible, but there needs to ideally be some reasonable form of tempering of that in order to prevent because ill-advised advancement.
If you were committed to pure scientific advancement and pure, you would just become robots. That would be the
Well,
most
the other thing is,
efficient way.
if everything was down to pure experimentation, then you would literally have to do something as stupid as having a third world war to see what the outcome would be.
Yeah.
Purely for that reason, just to as an experiment rather than any other reason.
But it's sort of political science and a lot of the social sciences are very complicated things where there's not really so much of a right answer
Yeah.
in a lot of cases.
I've had enough of right and wrong, or the concept of right and wrong. I mean, obviously there are some things which are clearly, I say I've had enough of the concept of right and wrong, I was going to say there's some things that are clearly wrong, and there are some things that are clearly right. But
I think
there's a lot of in-between stuff that people try to categorise, and it's like, no, they're just different points of view.
Yeah.
They don't have to conflict.
There is a certain part of me that's just sort of... I think the important thing is, and this gets to the whole Judeo-Christian values thing, because a lot of people think through colonialism we've reached this point of advancement or whatever, so
hello,
what we've done is justified here.
Star Stuff just came in. We're talking culture.
But it sort of gets to a point where you feel like, oh, we've gotten to this point socially. I'm happy here because, if I go any further, then that's fucking me over.
Yeah. In some senses, and I don't know if this is Western culture that because I'm part of Westernized society that I'm only really exposed to this primarily. I'm fed up with the predominance of the Judeo-Christian idea. I don't know much about Hinduism, but Buddhism. What do you think of that?
Buddhism, I would say, if I had to pick a religion to follow, would be it. Because
see, I don't actually think of it as a religion.
See, when you get to more Eastern religions, there is a sort of overlap between philosophy and religion, a lot heavier overlap, because whilst there is philosophy inherent to the Abrahamic religions, which are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which, by the way, all follow the same God, if you're not aware. Just they all fucking disagree on which prophet said what and whether they're actually the son of God or whatever.
Do you know what I have a major problem with, though?
Yeah.
All of that, the idea of any kind of, certainly monotheistic faith, is basically about authority and dominance. And I say dominance specifically because that comes from the Latin word domine, which means lord.
Yeah.
And it's about being dominated.
In the most sort of useful interpretation of something like Buddhism, it's this philosophy, and it's very similar to my own meaning of life thing about enlightenment, where it's all based around teaching and learning to try and get the best out of life. The difference is that there's something sort of very set about Buddhism, I guess, especially when you get into like Shaolin monks.
Things seem to have gone over the centuries more towards two distinct philosophies, where you've got the monotheistic faiths and then you've got the more kind of philosophically free kind of spiritual things like Buddhism. Whereas back in the ancient world, you had the Romans and the Greeks that had multiple gods who were fallible and
yeah, well, you get this in Hinduism, and this confuses a lot of
we're on religion,
people from
but that's a big part. Of
confuses
culture, so.
A lot of people from Western cultures that if you follow a different god in Hinduism to somebody else, that's a huge deal. It's not just I'm a Hindu; it's that I follow Vishnu.
I was just going to say,
I follow Ganesh, or
is there one called Brahma?
Probably, possibly.
Yeah, I think that comes from my thought, and in that sense, comes from an Arthur C. Clarke book actually, which I'm sure had a spacecraft in it that was called Brahma. Can't remember.
I'll look it up.
I was just thinking something really profound, and then it disappeared from my head.
I think
I just solved the problems of the
from a humanistic perspective,
and then forgot it.
the best thing to get from religion, because if you're going to get anything from it, if it's happened, you may as well try and get something from it, is that there's a lot of poetry, specifically in Hinduism, between different stories to do with different gods, because they're a lot less infallible than the gods in the Abrahamic faith. The god in the Abrahamic faith, it's like, they're always right, they know what's right, they know everything. Whereas these gods in polytheistic faiths actually fight with each other, so they can't both be right.
I want to put a theory forward, or an idea forward. Obviously, for quite some time, Westernized society has been kind of associated with monotheistic faiths, hasn't it?
Brahma is the Hindu creator god.
Yeah. So yeah, monotheistic Western society. Over time, it seems that we are possibly, hopefully, edging towards a more humanist or atheistic.
It's secular
society.
Generally.
Yeah. Do you think, in that case, that Western society essentially is in the process of escaping from collective Stockholm syndrome?
It's quite bizarre because Stockholm is a city in Western society. No, it's not.
Well,
but
the reason I say that is because the whole idea of a monotheistic faith is about, as I say, about dominance, but it's also being in love with your captor.
It's escaping from one captor, but underneath that, the people that actually wrote these gods into history, there's societal pressures that still society, the trap that still urged them to attach a person to their frigid ideas on life, or a being to these ideas. The same influences, and you have to do this and you can't do this for illogical reasons. Those same influences are still there.
But culturally, so
improved.
But culturally, it was a way of controlling people.
Mm.
So, bearing in mind that we do seem to be moving away from that, and I think this is something that is a necessary part, unfortunately, of a society's progress. What is that control being replaced by? Because that I think a society, unfortunately, I think it has to have some form of control over its citizens. Whether or not that's benign or malevolent, I suppose, is the question. But what is it that keeps a society?
See, people like that. People like knowing what's going to happen, knowing certain people will act this certain way because that's how they're supposed to. If they don't act this way, then people won't like them.
That's security, isn't it? That's safety.
People feel safe with things that they know.
Yeah.
And this is why there's backlash against new ideas.
To a certain extent, I suppose the law can achieve a lot of that.
Yeah, and it's important to say specifically there is a philosophy of legalism, but
the problem with that is the law has to work.
Yeah. Well, the law isn't just
the judicial
in the first
system
place.
has to work.
Well, the judicial system, but also the laws that actually end up bringing people into that system.
Do you think...
Because something like Section 28 wasn't a just law.
But when something like, say, the rise of the Nazis and Hitler and World War I and World War II happened, do you think that's the point at which society is kind of almost going through a process of revolution? Because a particular controlling force has become so dominant that it almost has to reach a point where it almost implodes and there's a reaction to it? Or
it was too organised to be a revolution.
No, I'm not talking about the actual sort of fascist regime. I'm talking about what happened as a result of that.
Culturally, if you're talking about sort of the revolving, the
wheel of fortune.
Yeah. It was a sort of revolution that way, but in sort of general speaking, no, it wasn't a revolution because
More of an overreaching of a regime that collapsed as a result because it got too big for
it was more a manipulation of democracy in Germany, and revolutions don't really happen
that
through.
feels way too familiar.
Well, there are some very interesting parallels between the Brexit Party and the Nazi Party, Nazzo Party.
Natso?
Yeah, like
Natso?
Nazzo is the National Socialist. It's the actual party, but Nazi generally refers to it's like Tory.
This is a slight digression, but I kind of
Very like Tories.
when we're talking about all this sort of stuff. I mean, obviously there are times when you could say we slag off America, but we're kind of commenting on their political system at the moment.
Yeah.
But we also talk a lot about, in the same wording, if you like, with the same kind of disrespect, we talk about our own political system here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out why 3/4 of our listenership are in America.
Well, because here's the thing: when we're talking about culture, usually there's a sort of disconnect between the government and its people, even in a democracy.
Yeah.
Because our democracies aren't really perfect. It doesn't actually represent people very well.
I suppose in a global community that kind of makes sense, though, those kind of statistics, because although we are based in Britain, I mean, in numbers, we're probably more biased towards the UK in listenership because the UK has a lot less people. So in terms of the British potential audience, fuck that, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. The English-speaking potential audience,
right?
America has one hell of a shitload more potential listeners. So actually, 3 times as many of those is not that big of a deal. It just feels weird to think that we're being listened to by. I mean, how different is the American culture? Because the American culture seems to.
There is also a factor there that
have
quite a few UK listeners might be using VPNs that trick the system into thinking that they are from the US.
Well, just to fool us.
There are certain
listeners.
Well, not just to fool us, but there are like some TV shows that are mainly available in America.
Yeah. I did read there's been a fair amount of, I see at D23, the Disney thing, they're talking a lot about all the content that's going to be coming out on Disney Plus, and there's a lot of really good stuff coming on there that people weren't really necessarily expecting. But the rumour is that there's going to be a lot of people in Britain that will be making use of VPNs to access that.
Well,
you can't get away with it on Netflix, I think, although I've got a VPN and there is a thing called obfuscated.
If the whole porn block thing is resurrected then and actually goes through, because it just didn't, because it's unimplementable.
Does that not mean, though, that the VPN industry would have a capital interest in making sure that the porn block happens?
I don't know. I mean, they're probably... I don't know. Probably, but it's sort of on a basis of stop biting your nails.
I'm not. I'm biting a wart on my thumb.
Yeah. How do you get that?
Oh, it's been there for a long time. It's nasty.
Don't fucking put your mouth near it then.
Sorry.
Anyway, I've lost my train of thought.
Chuff chuff.
Right. So you did mention just briefly earlier. So we were saying about that sort of culturally enriched thing where that's sort of usually preserved for prestigious things. You did mention urban culture.
Rama. Sorry, carry on.
Which is quite often synonymous with African American culture, like hip hop, that sort of thing. Which presents a very uncomfortable thing where
I don't know about
quite often,
but it's certainly a part of urban culture.
Yeah, well, hip hop's quite synonymous at least, and that originated from African American culture. But a lot of music has originated from that.
Yeah.
Now,
But again, I mean, like when
blues and jazz giving birth to rock.
Well, art has always taken advantage of fusing different cultures of.
Yeah.
I mean, when you mention hip hop, I must admit I'm fairly ignorant on that particular sort of genre, but rap is that part of that kind of culture?
Yeah.
The immediate thing that springs to mind is when talking about fusion of different art forms is "Walk This Way" with Run DMC and Aerosmith is a glaring example of where two very different and often opposing cultures came together at a time when it was unexpected and highly unusual.
Yeah.
You know, rock fans would not have gone anywhere near rap when that came out, but and vice versa. But that song did fantastically well and still is well known. And I think that's become more and more accepted now as different, and to the point where it's no longer that easy to, and this is a good thing, to pigeonhole artists, cultural kind of, because influences are so mixed now.
Yeah.
Culture has become global.
There are some artists, and this is sometimes as a necessity by trying to sell more records or probably now get more downloads, where they want to stay in a certain lane so that listeners don't get angry and stop listening to their music because they're doing something new. So the same listeners keep coming to the same thing, but perhaps branching out would actually be better in a lot of cases. It's just there's a sort of scary element of branching out because you're not sure if you're going to pick up an audience that likes that sort of music.
Yeah. One glaring example of that for me would be Muse.
Yeah.
Who I've not completely gone off, but I've certainly lost my kind of obsessive kind of fandom of them, I suppose, since they've been going more and more kind of electronic. I was a lot more a fan of their sort of heavier rock style stuff, but at the same time, I suppose to a certain extent it has introduced me to some of the like the sort of dubstep stuff that they did, and they do a lot of more electronic based stuff now that I wouldn't necessarily have even given a go if it had been from an artist in that genre.
Yeah, this is the idea of going to new places as well, physically, where if you go to a new place, try the food, try the music,
try the food. That's a big thing for me. Food.
Try the nightlife. I get whatever. Try that sort of thing.
The local hookers.
Even hopefully not, but there's probably someone at Prague that did.
Except possibly Thailand. Be careful there.
Well, there's various problems with prostitution, but don't shit on trans people.
Unless they ask you to. They might be into that.
And you're comfortable with that too. This is weird. Anyway,
take a cup with you.
Christ. Oh, you always derail my train of thought.
Yeah, I enjoy it so
even
much.
if you don't like what you taste or what you hear and what you experience.
At least you've given it a go.
Yeah. Give it a go. Take on board as much as you can from it.
But then you can say, I tried it, but I wasn't really a fan. But you're not criticising something with no experience.
Well, I find that interesting with...
And to be honest, if you've tried something, you would tend to be less critical. You would just say it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, I've possibly mentioned this programme before, The Misadventures of Ramesh Ranganathan.
You have.
So, it's done 2 series.
He's got a weird eye, hasn't he?
Okay. He's done 2 series of this, and I found it interesting, particularly what he said about Mongolia, because there's a sort of particular spiritual thing with Mongolia to do with, I guess, religion there, where there's a certain point that is basically just a patch of dirt that's meant to be the spiritual center of the world or something. So he's kind of a bit of a cynical guy. It's quite a cynical person. So he wasn't really a fan of that part, but there's quite a big culture of wrestling there as well, which...
Hurry up, because I've got a thing in my mind that I want to say, and I'll
he
forget
wasn't
it.
really a fan of doing because he's kind of fat, so that meant that he'd get naked. Not completely naked, but like take his top off, which is kind of revealing of that sort of thing. So he said, whilst it wasn't really my cup of tea, I still enjoyed myself and learned something from it, but a lot more people would enjoy it more than I did.
It's gone. See what I fucking mean?
But I watched one of them yesterday, and this brings up an interest.
Just say something and it's gone.
What?
I wanted to say something and it's gone from my mind.
Well, that's your problem.
Yeah.
I watched one yesterday on Colombia, and
I know a Colombian.
Okay. Care to say anything else about them? Or...
No.
Okay.
They're not a drug lord.
No, well, there you go. That's the first thing most people think of when they think of Colombia.
But that's kind of because of Netflix for me.
About 10% of the tourists there are apparently because of the Netflix show Narcos.
Yeah, it's ace. It is a really good show.
But there's a sort of uncomfortable...
Well, I see that's what's his name in Narcos? The guy,
Pablo Escobar.
Yeah, him. That's not the first time I've heard his name. There's I
would hope not.
Another series called Entourage. Where
a very famous person.
Yeah, but not if you don't follow the drug trade.
The very famous person anyway, among
I'd heard his name. Among culture.
Yeah.
I'd heard his name.
Well, it's sort of...
That's probably... I mean, he I suppose he's the most famous example of somebody who could quite easily have ascended to political... Well, you could argue that politically he was very powerful, but to have ascended to a political position, mind you, that's not necessarily... I mean, like, there's a lot of corrupt politicians, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, there's a certain thing of, apparently, his actions ended up killing about 5,000 people. But through that, he sort of...
Yeah, but you could say a lot worse than that about some American presidents.
Yeah. But it's sort of innocent people.
Yeah.
But then you have to define,
as I say,
who you consider innocent.
Yeah.
But whilst he was doing that, a lot of the money he got from the drug trade, even though it was from ill-gotten gains, he built up neighbourhoods.
Yeah.
To the point where there's an entire neighbourhood named after him in the city of Birch. Stop biting your nails.
I'm biting a wart.
So stop biting the wart, because then the wart will spread.
It won't. I'll just bleed.
No, just get it checked out. Christ.
It's not in a hotel. What are you about?
Fuck off.
Have we got anything more serious to say?
I have, yes.
We'll better go
I
with it
was in the middle of it, and then
We're nearly an hour and a half in.
Fuck off.
It's 11:15.
Fuck off.
You've got school in the morning.
Fuck off. Christ.
I'm not Christ, but...
Right.
Say the important shit.
So there was a sort of uncomfortable line there, where a lot of Colombians, Christ, sort of...
This whole drugs war shit does my head in.
What?
Well, it's all... Why don't they... Sorry, uncomfortable
go
line.
On. Say what you were saying. I want to know what you're saying.
Prohibition doesn't work.
No, but...
Well, it doesn't work in the way that we are told that it should. It probably works for some capitalists somewhere.
No, usually it does actually end up in more of the thing that's being banned happening.
Yeah,
depends
exactly.
how it is done.
So it works for some capitalists somewhere who want that income.
But it's sort of... Pablo Escobar did actually end up doing some good with that.
Yeah.
But then that's a very high-risk business, obviously, because he did end up actually getting shot after being chased after.
By the
by
way, I would highly
the US
recommend
government
to anyone
and
watching that
militias.
series. It's quite
Right. Ramesh Ranganathan actually went round with someone that I think was actually briefly a character actually in Narcos that was Colombian, who was like a radio host.
Yeah.
And they were not really comfortable with that being Colombia's reputation because obviously having a drug lord as the most famous thing about your country, it's actually a great feeling.
What do you think's the most famous thing about our country?
Probably cups of teas. Well,
Cups of tea.
If you ask people like around the world, usually they say, "I'm gonna have a cup of tea."
All right, so not slavery then.
Spotted dick. Well, ideally that would be something that gets more attention, but it doesn't because it's not fun.
At the moment, probably Brexit.
There is a sort of
Scottish culture.
Probably bagpipes. There is a sort of or golf. There is a sort of glamour around a drug lord because it's sort of like a super villain because he had like private villas there.
Funnily enough,
there were loads of armed guards.
That does make me not realise, but highlight something that often the anti-hero is a big part of art, isn't it? Culture. That kind of almost like a Robin Hood kind of figure.
But quite often Pablo Escobar is described as that.
So
but
art
he still hurt a lot of people in the process.
Does often hold up the enemy of the state, if you like, as the hero.
Not always.
Not always, but often.
I guess, but
because they'll often be responsible for at least a part in the downfall of a regime that is
sort of a lot. The police around that time were very corrupt in themselves, so it was sort of lesser of two evils idea. Sort of uncomfortable legacies, I guess, where... And I think the important thing is, at the end of the day, we can't really change what's happened in the past, but we should still learn from the mistakes that have happened in the past and
I was just thinking about what do you think is going to happen with the culture, or there's obviously a distinct difference between Hong Kong and China culturally.
Yeah, well,
what's going to happen there? Because at the moment there's a lot of conflict going on between those two cultures. What do you think the people of China... See, you can look at the situation in Hong Kong and see it as a battle between the authorities of China and the people of Hong Kong. But what do you think the people of China think about
what they're told to? Because they have a culture that is very much dictated by propaganda. It'll only be some very particular people that seek to break the mold in most situations that will be able to shake themselves of the influence of heavy propaganda. But also, if you are a dissident in China, you have to be very clever not to get caught.
What's a counterculture?
Confusing thing. It's most described by the sort of hippie movement in the 60s, but nowadays everyone's claiming to be a counterculture because it's sort of cool. Something against...
It must be difficult to be a counterculture in a very diverse society.
Yeah, but most of the countercultures in diverse societies are assholes. Because in a diverse society, in a society that accepts the diversity, you've
got to be fairly extreme to not be accepted.
Yeah, well, it is sort of that... I can't remember. I think it's Karl Popper. I don't know, I've seen the image circulated about the intolerance of intolerance.
Yeah.
Because quite often, specifically to do with like right-wing YouTube channels, that sort of thing, they describe themselves as a counterculture because it's going against PC culture. But when you actually look at it, the people in government are going against so-called political correctness, even though they're the politicians. Yet they're still getting elected, so it's sort of like, this doesn't actually apply to politicians. It's not actually mainstream culture. PC culture is kind of a counterculture in itself. But it's just all grey
in general, I mean, there are so
blah.
many different definitions and kinds of culture. But in general, I like it, despite everything that we've said about the different cultures throughout history and the different mixes of cultures and the different definitions of culture. I still like the idea of the word. I still like what it represents. I still like that there is such a thing as culture.
Yeah. Well, I think at the point where you say that a culture is static, then it ceases to be culturally enriched.
I suppose, well, actually, funnily you should say that, because the one definition that we decided to disregard at the beginning of this was the idea of a biological culture. And exactly the same thing would apply to that, because a biological culture is something which is growing and changing.
I guess.
At the point at which it stagnates and stops, it's dead. So it's no longer a culture.
Yeah. It is sort of just keep growing. There's no point where
And adapt.
Yeah, there's
Survive.
no point where you know everything and you're the wisest person. Just keep having new, different experiences.
Essentially, then, I suppose culture, in its simplest, purest form, is evolution.
And
in action.
Okay, I am gonna go into something which opens up a whole new can of worms this far into the podcast. Cultural appropriation. A lot of people don't like that phrase upon initial reaction.
I kind of do. Because otherwise, well, it depends.
I think there's a sort of...
I like chicken tikka masala.
Well, that's not cultural appropriation, that's cultural appreciation.
But it's not, because it's British. It was invented in Bradford.
It's appreciating British culture, then.
Yeah,
but it's appreciating...
Yeah. But it's calling it Indian.
Yeah, well, it's appreciating influences from India on British culture.
I say that, but I would have some other form of tikka masala now, because I wouldn't eat a
but
chicken
it's still...
now, but,
the camera's just gone. It's
by YouTubers.
Appreciating the Indian subculture of Britain.
Yeah.
Because, again, due to a pretty nasty history, there's a pretty large Indian subculture in Britain. But it's sort of... There can be an overreaction where people will just criticise people for appreciating other cultures, and usually they aren't people from that culture. So I would check that in the first place.
Yeah.
Don't really speak on behalf of other people from different cultures, because you don't really fucking know what you're talking about. But there is a sort of level where you're being disrespectful in a way that isn't trying to spark conversation or new ideas. You're just being disrespectful for the sake of it, really. Yeah. Like, I think there was a model a while ago that in their fashion shoot, whatever show, I don't really give a shit about fashion, they came out with an Native American headdress whilst in very skimpy clothing with like feathers coming out of it, which is very disrespectful, because that's meant to be like the head of a tribe.
Right.
And given that Native American culture is something that's already been shat on significantly, it's sort of like, just stop. Why is this necessary?
Yeah, I suppose. But there's differing viewpoints on that, I suppose. And
I think quite often...
To me, it's like, well, yeah, but who says that a Native American can't be sexy?
No, but in the way that it was done, it was very disrespectful.
Right.
Maybe that headdress was usually reserved for like a chieftain.
Right.
Someone that would be the head of the tribe.
Maybe if she was of Native American descent, she would have the right to make the choice about whether or not to do that.
Yeah. Well, she would definitely have a lot more credence there.
Yeah.
But she wasn't, so it sort of... It at least sort of get some sort of permission.
Yeah, sort of I get what you mean, I suppose. It's the symbolism, isn't it? It's the metaphor that's being put forward there.
And then there's... Well, it's sort of the commercialisation of this idea of I guess cowboys and Indians, that sort of
If you
thing.
can imagine maybe somebody turning up in the wearing a bikini with the Pope's headgear on,
Yeah, I
it would be a
guess.
similar kind of.
It would be understandable for Catholics to be a bit pissed off. Except in the case of the Catholic
Bonus.
Church. Well, in the case of the Catholic Church, I mean, there is a sort of repression going on with Protestantism against Catholics in both America and in Britain, especially towards the Irish.
Well, we could always just stick them in a room together and let them kill each other off.
No, please don't do that. And quite often to the Polish, because I think they're generally more Catholic.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, that's why there's, I think, specifically in America, because we did learn about this in history, learning about the period of quite a lot of immigration in
I'm
the
sure
20s.
there's a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of humanist Poles out there as well.
Yeah, well, it's a sort of country that's more predominantly Catholic than Protestant.
There did used to be a lot of Polish Jews, didn't there?
Yeah, until they were killed.
Sorry, that was not funny.
Yeah, well, when you ask that question, it's all like, what fucking answer do you expect to get?
Well, I did say there did used to be.
It's very fucking dark.
Not. Oh shit. Perhaps we should think about trying to close soon.
What, before you end up writing fucking Mein Kampf? I'm joking.
But the thing is, though, if I had been the kind of person that would write that, I wouldn't be referring to it, because the idea was that they were being wiped out from history, and you would want to pretend they never existed if you were writing that sort of thing, not acknowledge that you killed them all off.
I don't know. I just don't. Just think before you say some things, okay?
Well, yeah, but I'm not as. No.
Just think before you speak is a generally good rule.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I'm sorry, guys. I didn't. I just didn't. So,
right.
This has been.
No, I was on a thing about cultural appropriation. You're
What?
just gonna derail that because you just said something stupid.
Hurry up, then.
Right. I think in general, and there's a good video
You're going to make me put a link in the description now, aren't you?
by a YouTube channel called T1J
Okay.
on cultural appropriation. The more recent one you should search up
Okay.
because that is more
Recent.
well, it's more updated.
Because it's more recent.
Well, yeah. The previous one overlooked a lot of stuff.
All right. Okay.
That explains a lot of that from the perspective of
Please tell
someone
me,
who is African American.
in summary,
So,
what is cultural appropriation?
taking a part of another culture without respect or permission from people of that culture.
Right.
And whilst it's not always, you have to ask permission for everything from a Pole for eating Polish
obviously,
pretzels or whatever.
the example that you brought up there was the headdress thing. Obviously, there must be, to a certain extent, some grey area. That's obviously a blatant
when
appropriation issue. But
yeah.
but there must be issues around whether or not you're disrespecting someone's culture by appropriating it or paying homage to it, and that, by definition, must depend on the observer as to how they regard your depiction of that culture.
Yeah. It's sort of the line between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation can get quite muddy.
And because if you're trying to pay homage to a culture, you're depicting it from the point of view of your own culture. So really, the barometer would have to be from the side of the culture that you're depicting.
Yeah, and there is also...
So your intentions could be good.
I was getting at this earlier. When you are wanting to criticise another culture, being aware that British culture whatever the fuck that is, because what ideally makes Britain great is the diversity. But apparently that's not what people have in mind when they say take back control or whatever fucking bollocks. When you do criticise another culture, be aware that the Western civilization, whatever the fuck that actually means, isn't the perfect example. It's not utopian.
I can criticise British culture because I'm British.
Yeah, well, there is that, but then there's also just sort of like us criticising American culture. They're not exactly struggling. They are a sort of establishment there. In world culture, they are...
Well, yeah, I mean, they export a hell of a lot of their artistic culture globally.
Well, I particularly noticed coming back, and I think I did mention this on your podcast, coming back from Prague, when we stopped at a German services, that the...
Better Call Paul, by the way.
Server actually thought that
Go and listen
Nan
to
was
it.
American.
Episode 16, Prague.
Because they'd only...
Thank you.
Because they'd only heard English from American programs. Well, mainly from American programs. So they just sort of assumed that us speaking English meant that we were American.
Like and subscribe.
But probably similarly to if you hear someone speaking German, you think that they're from Germany.
5-star review.
Can you fuck off? Right, let's end the bloody podcast because you're just getting on my nerves now.
Yes, it worked.
Dick. There is a lot more to talk about. We didn't actually
There always is.
Right, we didn't actually get onto like definitions of democracy again, or ancient Greece.
Yeah,
or colonialism in much detail. Yeah, but I mean, of necessity, there is a certain amount of overlap between the different subjects that we discuss. Quickly on colonialism, because I did get at it, but it's sort of now the important thing is to, although things like the blues, it particularly being in America,
I love the blues,
are born from the slave trade.
Led Zeppelin stole the blues.
Well, they built upon it. That's the idea of
True.
music. They appreciated it.
True.
I think music is something where generally...
stealing in music is respected.
Yeah.
In art, actually, in general, is a respected form of creativity. Because the thing is, you can't steal any great artistic thing without adding part of yourself to it. Unless you're making a carbon copy of the same thing and passing it off as your own. If you do anything to change any work, anything that you steal, any idea that you use, you are adding part of yourself to it, which is the progression of art, progression of culture.
Yeah.
It's adding yourself to something pre-existing, which is the spread of culture, isn't it?
I think the point is, and I was with Colombia, good stuff has come of like the tourism that's come.
Have you got
out
any
of that.
Coke?
No. Good stuff has come.
Oh shit! I forgot to buy you a bottle of Coke.
Oh,
sorry. You asked me to get you
just
some Coke.
annoy me every time you fucking interrupt me.
I know, but you asked me to get you a bottle of Coke and I forgot.
It's okay. I won't kill you. I'll get a Dr. Pepper tomorrow.
It's closed now as well.
I'll get Dr. Pepper and Mummy deal tomorrow.
I feel bad now.
Whatever. It's fine. Just shut the fuck up. Good stuff comes out of it even though there is an uncomfortable history there, good stuff can still come of it. In regards to cultural criticism...
You're still talking about culture?
Yes, okay, right. Yeah, I'm trying to, because you keep fucking interrupting me.
Chill, dude. I broke him again.
Right. And this is a good general thing for life, is it's possible to disrespect ideas without disrespecting people.
Are you looking at me?
I'm looking at you because it's in reference to you know what.
Disrespecting ideas without disrespecting people.
Because in my philosophy...
Yeah, absolutely.
There is a certain point where people having enough fucked up ideas makes me lose respect for them.
Yeah, it can break down into pure
It's sort
insult throwing.
it's a sort of build-up of people having bad ideas, but also having bad actions that makes me lose respect for them. So,
and you can end up criticizing them.
So, like me celebrating the death of David Koch as a good thing for the world. He was a shitty human being that did a lot of bad in the world, so he's lost basic respect as a human being.
Yeah.
I have a sort of basic level of respect.
Just on that point,
until benefit of the doubt of people when I meet them.
Before, just in case we do manage to come to an end soon. Before we do, I would like to put out something which is possibly, it can be related to culture, but just please, guys, anyone out there, live by your own code and don't let others shit on you.
That's not the greatest of messages, if I'm honest.
What, don't let others shit on you?
No, but live by your own code, because your own code might be shit. Like, taking other people's ideas, but use your own judgment, because like, what else are you fucking use?
How the fuck is that different from living by your own code? Well, use your own judgment.
Living by your own code might not mean taking in other people's ideas. That might mean just
using your own judgment. Might not. Your own judgment is part of your own code.
Well, it's sort of what else are you going to use at that point?
Just basically don't allow other people to get away with disrespecting you. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, pay attention to why they might be, though. Learn something from it if any good's going to come from that, because otherwise, then you're not getting anything out of that. And what's the point in that? You take something on board, even if it isn't what that person wants you to take on board. Learn something from it. Expand your mind. Take drugs.
I just think we should stop now. I did all that.
The last one was a joke, by the way. But if you want to, I'm not stopping you, because I literally can't. Anyway, I've been Firebolt.
I've been The Orbiter.
And this has been a very
culturally diverse
podcast.
Episode
42.
Goodbye.
Culture. Bye.
Sleep well.
Bye. Bob.
What the fuck was that about? Bob doesn't belong here.
No.
He's culturally different from us.
Bob is a collective.
Bob is a non-entity.
Bob is a collective.
A collective non-entity.
It has no
members.
Personage. Bob is Borg. Bob is love.
Resistance is futile.
Okay.
That's fuck's sake.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.
The Orbiter is a knob jockey. But you already knew that, right? The Orbiter is a cockwomble. The Orbiter is a shit person.
What have you been saying about me?